The revelation. The Galactic Assembly Hall stretched upward like a crystalline cathedral, its translucent walls filtering starlight from 17 different solar systems. Inside, representatives from 300 civilizations gathered around the massive circular platform that served as both meeting place and judgment court. Today's agenda concerned a troubling pattern that had emerged across millennia of interstellar contact. Ambassador Velteri of the ethereal Concordat adjusted her gossamer wings nervously as she prepared to address the assembly. Her species, like most others present, had evolved from small, quick creatures that survived through camouflage and flight. The data she was about to present challenged everything they understood about intelligent life. Esteemed colleagues, she began, her melodic voice carrying through the chamber's perfect acoustics. Our xenobiologists have completed their comprehensive study of evolutionary patterns across all known sentient species. The results are unprecedented. The holographic display materialized above the central platform, showing a complex web of evolutionary trees. Each branch represented a different civilization's path from primitive life to spacefaring intelligence. The pattern was unmistakable. As you can see, 312 of the 313 documented species share a common trait. We all evolved from prey animals. Our ancestors survived through hiding, fleeing, or developing defensive adaptations. This shaped our psychology, our societies, and our approach to the cosmos. The Cethurian delegate, a being whose ancestors were burrowing creatures, chittered in agreement. The Avalons, descended from gliding mammals, rustled their membrane-covered arms. Even the mighty Colossians, despite their current imposing size, traced their lineage to herd animals that found safety in numbers. Velteri continued, "This shared heritage explains our natural tendency toward cooperation, our emphasis on defensive technologies, and our preference for diplomatic solutions. But there is one species that breaks this pattern entirely." The display zoomed in on a single branch, isolated from the others like a lightning bolt against a clear sky. The chamber fell silent. The humans of Sol 3, who achieved faster than light travel only 50 cycles ago, appear to be our first encounter with a sapient species descended from apex predators. The reaction was immediate. Wings fluttered, scales rattled, and the subsonic hum of nervous communication filled the air. The human delegation, seated in the observer section, remained conspicuously still. Commander Sarah Chen, head of Earth's diplomatic corps, watched the assembly's reaction with careful attention. Beside her, Dr. Marcus Webb, their chief xenobiologist, whispered, "Here we go." The Zephyrian ambassador, whose people evolved from creatures similar to Earth's rabbits, stood abruptly. This explains their unusual behavior patterns. Their aggressive exploration, their rapid technological advancement. Their what? Chen asked, standing smoothly. Though humans were still provisional members, she had speaking rights. "Please continue. We're curious about these observations." The Zephyrian's large eyes dilated in what humans had learned was a fear response. "Your military doctrine, for instance. Every other species develops weapons for defense. Yours seemed designed for hunting." Chen smiled, trying to appear non-threatening. "It didn't work. We prefer the term proactive defense. But you raise an interesting point. Our approach to conflict resolution does differ from galactic standards." The assembly erupted in discussion. The Morvek delegate, whose ancestors were filter feeders, gurgled through their translator. "This explains the Terra Mars incident. When pirates threatened their colony ship, instead of evasive maneuvers or calling for help, the humans pursued them across 3 systems and dismantled their entire network." Chen finished. "Yes, we're aware that was considered unusual." Velteri regained control of the session. "The question before us is not whether humans are dangerous. All species can be dangerous. The question is whether a predator-descended intelligence can truly integrate with our cooperative galactic community." Dr. Webb stood beside Chen. "If I may address the biological concerns. Yes, our ancestors were persistence hunters. But evolution shaped us into something unique. We're not just predators. We're social predators. Cooperation is hardwired into our psychology, just expressed differently. The Quilani representative, covered in iridescent feathers, spoke up. But your history, the wars, the competition, the constant conflict. How do we reconcile this with galactic harmony? Chen nodded thoughtfully. Fair question. Yes, we've had conflicts. But consider this. Wolves fight among themselves, yet they also form the most cohesive packs in nature. Our competitive nature drove innovation, but our social bonds created civilization. We compete fiercely, but we also sacrifice everything for our pack. The discussion continued for hours. Examples were cited, behaviors analyzed, and fears both expressed and addressed. Then came the moment that would reshape galactic politics forever. The perimeter alarms screamed to life. The Void Hunters, a mysterious force that had been consuming systems at the galaxy's edge, had arrived in force. But this wasn't a distant threat anymore. They had somehow bypassed all defensive networks and appeared in the assembly system itself. The reaction was immediate and predictable. 300 species responded as their evolution had programmed them. They scattered, sought shelter, or froze in place. Emergency protocols activated as defensive shields powered up and distress signals broadcast across the galaxy. Only the humans moved differently. Ken's eyes narrowed as she processed the tactical display. Dr. Webb, analysis. Webb was already pulling up data on his portable scanner. Multiple breach points. They're using some kind of phase technology we haven't seen before. The assembly's defenses aren't designed for this. Around them, delegates huddled in fear. The Void Hunters had never been stopped, only avoided. Entire civilizations had relocated rather than faced them. Ambassador Chen, Velteri called out, her wings trembling. The evacuation protocols are active. We must flee. Chen looked at the tactical display again, then at her small delegation. 5 humans among hundreds of aliens. She made a decision that would echo through history. No. The word cut through the panic like a blade. Dr. Webb, contact the Asimov. Tell Captain Rodriguez to prep for combat operations. Mr. Tanaka, I need you to interface with the Assembly's defense grid. Ms. Okafor, coordinate with any security forces still functioning. Mr. Petrov, get me a channel to those Void Hunter ships. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the human delegation transformed from diplomats to something else entirely. Something their prey-descended minds couldn't quite comprehend. Chen turned to the Assembly. You've spent hours debating whether predator-born humans can integrate with your society. Now you're about to see why evolution made us different. We don't run from threats. We face them. The Colossian delegate, largest of all the species present, stammered. But they're unstoppable. The Void Hunters have never been defeated. Chen smiled, and this time she didn't try to hide the predator's edge. You've been trying to stop them with shields and evasion. Classic prey behavior. But there's something you haven't tried. What? Velteri asked. Hunting them back. The Assembly watched as the 5 humans coordinated a response with ruthless efficiency. The lone human frigate in system, a ship that other species considered laughably underdefended, began maneuvers that defied conventional wisdom. Instead of raising shields to maximum and preparing to flee, it powered weapons and moved toward the threat. This is insane. The Quilani delegate squawked. 1 ship against a Void Hunter fleet. Dr. Webb looked up from his calculations. Not 1 ship, 1 pack. Watch. The human frigate broadcast something on all frequencies, not a distress signal or a plea for mercy. It was a sound that made every prey-descended species in the Assembly instinctively shudder. A hunting call. From the edges of the system, more signatures appeared. Human merchant vessels dropped their cargo and revealed hidden weapons. Mining ships reconfigured their equipment into improvised combat systems. Even the diplomatic yacht docked at the station powered up systems that shouldn't have existed on a civilian vessel. Chen activated the communication channel to the Void Hunters. When she spoke, Her voice carried none of the diplomatic polish from earlier. This was something older, something that had stalked across ancient savannas and through primordial forests. Attention, Void Hunter Fleet. I am Commander Sarah Chen of Earth. You've made a critical error. You've threatened our pack. The response was immediate. The Void Hunter ships, previously moving in perfect formation, suddenly scattered. For the first time in recorded history, they showed confusion. Chen continued, "You've spent centuries preying on civilizations that run and hide. But we're different. We're the species that looked at the stars and thought, I wonder what lives up there. And more importantly, I wonder what it tastes like." The human ships moved with coordinated precision, forming a pattern that seemed chaotic to the assembly, but followed an ancient logic. It was a hunting formation, adapted for three-dimensional space. Every species here evolved to avoid predators, Chen said to the aliens around her. But we evolved to be predators. And more than that, we evolved to be the most dangerous kind. We're persistence hunters. We don't give up. We don't get discouraged. We just keep coming. The Void Hunter Fleet, faced with something unprecedented in their long history of conquest, made a decision that shocked the galaxy. They retreated. The unstoppable force that had consumed entire systems fled from 5 human ships and a cargo freighter with jury-rigged weapons. As the threat receded, the assembly hall fell into stunned silence. 300 species stared at the human delegation with new understanding. Velteri spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. You drove them off." "How?" Chen holstered the sidearm she'd drawn during the crisis. Most of the delegates hadn't even noticed she was armed. Simple psychology. They're used to hunting prey. When they encountered other hunters, they didn't know how to respond. Predators are actually quite risk-averse. They can't afford injuries that might prevent future hunts. The Morvac delegate burbled thoughtfully. So when faced with resistance that could actually hurt them, they reassess. Dr. Webb finished. It's basic evolutionary logic, but only a species that thinks like a predator would recognize it. The implications settled over the assembly like a cosmic revelation. The humans hadn't won through superior technology or overwhelming force. They'd won through psychology, through understanding the mind of a hunter because they were hunters themselves. Chen addressed the assembly formally. "Esteemed delegates, you asked whether a predator-descended species can integrate with your community. I propose a different question. Can your community afford not to integrate us? The galaxy is full of threats that prey thinking cannot counter. Perhaps it's time to admit that diversity includes more than just different ways of running and hiding." The debate that followed would reshape galactic politics. For the first time, the assembled species considered that their unified evolutionary heritage might be a weakness, not a strength. That perhaps, in a universe full of dangers, having hunters as allies was not something to fear, but something to embrace. As the session adjourned, Velteri approached Chen privately. "I must ask, when you threatened to hunt them, were you serious? Could humanity really track the Void Hunters across the galaxy?" Chen's smile was warm but still carried that predator's edge. "Ambassador, we're the species that used to chase animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. We followed mammoths across continents. We've never encountered a trail we couldn't follow or prey we couldn't outlast. So yes, we were absolutely serious." Velteri's wings shimmered in what humans had learned was contemplation. Then perhaps the galaxy needs its first hunters after all. The human delegation left the assembly hall with provisional membership upgraded to full status. But more than that, they left with something unprecedented in galactic history. Respect born not from fear of their weapons, but from understanding of their nature. For the first time, in 50,000 years of galactic civilization, the prey had welcomed predators into their midst, and the universe would never be the same. The evolution. The transformation began slowly, like the first drops of rain before a thunderstorm. In the months following what historians would call the revelation at Assembly Point, humanity's role in galactic society shifted from curious newcomers to essential allies. But it was the arrival of the Devourers that truly tested this new paradigm. The Devourers were nothing like the Void Hunters. Where the Void Hunters had been enigmatic raiders, the Devourers were a force of nature. They emerged from dark space like a cosmic plague, consuming entire systems not for resources or territory, but seemingly for the act of consumption itself. They moved in massive swarms, each entity a biomechanical horror that adapted to every defense, learned from every encounter, and grew stronger with each victory. The galactic response was predictable. The ethereal Concordat proposed massive shield networks. The Quilani developed stealth fields to hide entire planets. The Cythurians began constructing underground bunker worlds. 3 centuries of galactic unity had produced marvels of defensive technology, but they all shared the same fundamental approach: avoid, evade, endure. Human Admiral John Way stood before the Emergency Defense Council, studying the star map that showed the Devourers' advance. Red zones marked consumed systems, yellow indicated threatened regions, and green showed areas still considered safe. The green was shrinking daily. With respect to my esteemed colleagues, John began, his voice carrying the quiet confidence that the galaxy had come to associate with human military leaders, we're treating cancer with bandages. Every defensive measure we implement just delays the inevitable. The Zephyrian Defense Coordinator's ears flattened. What alternative do you propose? The Devourers adapt to every weapon, overcome every barrier. 3 species have already begun total evacuation of their home systems. John nodded. Yes, they adapt. That's the problem with purely defensive thinking. You're letting them dictate the terms of engagement. It's time to flip the script. He activated a new display showing human military doctrine. The assembled species watched with the mixture of fascination and unease that had become common when humans discussed warfare. On Earth, we have a saying: the best defense is a good offense, but our specific approach comes from our evolutionary history. We're persistence hunters. We don't win through single overwhelming attacks. We win through constant pressure, adaptation, and most importantly, through understanding our prey. The Colossian Supreme General rumbled skeptically. The Devourers aren't prey. They're the ultimate predators. Zhang smiled. That's where you're wrong. Everything is prey to something. We just need to become better hunters. The human proposal was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Instead of massive defensive installations, they suggested small, highly mobile strike groups. Instead of trying to protect everything, they advocated for selective engagement. Instead of reacting to the Devourers' moves, they proposed to make the Devourers react to them. You want to hunt them? Velteri asked, her wings displaying the patterns of deep concern. The entire combined fleet couldn't stop their advance at Nexus Point. Because the combined fleet fought like prey, Admiral Zhang replied. Massed formations, static defenses, predictable retreats. We propose something different. Wolf pack tactics on a galactic scale. The strategy required a fundamental shift in thinking. Human captains would lead mixed species crews, teaching them to think like predators. Ships would operate in small, independent groups, striking at the edges of Devourer swarms, learning their patterns, exploiting weaknesses, and disappearing before overwhelming force could be brought to bear. The first test came at the Helix Nebula. A Devourer splinter swarm, roughly 1,000 entities, had broken off from the main mass to consume a mining operation. Traditional doctrine would have evacuated the system and written it off. The human-led strike force had other ideas. Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the mixed fleet from the bridge of the Persistent Hunter, a ship whose name perfectly embodied human military philosophy. Her crew included members of 12 different species, all struggling to understand human tactical thinking. Contact in 3 minutes, her Cythurian tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking nervously. Devourer swarm maintaining standard consumption pattern. Rodriguez studied the display. Standard pattern. That's their first mistake. Mr. Talkful, what do you see? The Quilani sensor operator ruffled his feathers uncertainly. I see a threat, Captain. Superior numbers, adaptive capability, overwhelming force. Look again, Rodriguez instructed. Don't see the swarm. See the individuals. What patterns do you notice? Tocqueville focused, his prey evolved pattern recognition finally clicking with human hunting wisdom. They're coordinating through the larger entities. The smaller ones follow pheromone trails or energy signatures. Excellent. So if we disrupt the leaders, understanding dawned across multiple species features. It wasn't about fighting the entire swarm. It was about breaking their coordination, creating confusion, and exploiting the chaos. The battle was unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of forming defensive lines, the human-led ships scattered into hunting pairs. They struck at specific targets, ignored others entirely, and withdrew before the swarm could adapt. They used decoys, false energy signatures, and controlled retreats to draw portions of the swarm into kill zones. The Morvac weapons officer on Rodriguez's ship gurgled in amazement. They're confused. The Devourers are actually confused. Rodriguez nodded. Predators expect prey to run in straight lines. When the prey starts thinking 3 moves ahead, predators lose their advantage. Now, spring the trap. The trap was pure human creativity. They'd seeded the nebula with modified mining charges, creating a maze of explosive hazards. But the key insight was psychological, not technological. The charges weren't meant to destroy the Devourers directly. They were meant to channel them, to use their own aggressive instincts against them. As the swarm pursued what they thought were fleeing ships, they ran directly into overlapping fields of fire from vessels that had circled back. The hunters had become the hunted. The victory at Helix sent shockwaves through both the galaxy and the Devourer collective. For the first time, a swarm had been not just repelled, but decimated. More importantly, the mixed crews had learned to think differently, to see opportunities where they once saw only threats. The transformation accelerated. Species that had spent millennia perfecting defensive technologies began exploring offensive capabilities. The Ethereals developed phase missiles that could bypass Devourer armor. The Cytherians created burrowing torpedoes that attacked from unexpected angles. Even the peaceful Zephyrians contributed, their natural speed making them excellent scouts and harassers. But the real evolution was psychological. Under human guidance, the galaxy's species began to shed the limitations of prey thinking. They learned that aggression didn't mean mindless violence, that hunting required patience and intelligence, and that sometimes the best way to protect something was to make threatening it too costly for any predator. The turning point came at the Battle of Threshold, where the main Devourer mass finally encountered the new Galactic Alliance. The Devourers had adapted to the wolf pack tactics, developing new formations and countermeasures. They expected to face the same strategies that had worked at Helix. They were wrong. Admiral Zhang, now commanding the combined fleet, had anticipated their adaptation. The mark of a true predator, he explained to his multi-species command staff, is not relying on the same hunting patterns. We evolve faster than our prey. The battle plan was audacious. Instead of wolf pack tactics, the humans organized something unprecedented, a persistence hunt on a stellar scale. The entire fleet would engage in a coordinated system-wide pursuit that would last not hours or days, but weeks. Impossible, the Colossian tactical advisor stated. No fleet can maintain combat operations for that duration. Zhang smiled. Human ancestors once chased prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. We've simply scaled up the principle. The Devourers are used to quick victories or retreats. They've never faced an enemy that simply keeps coming. The battle began with feints and probes, human ships leading strikes that seemed random but followed a complex pattern designed to wear down the Devourer collective. When the swarm adapted to one tactic, the fleet smoothly shifted to another. When they massed for overwhelming assault, the Alliance scattered and struck from multiple vectors. When they dispersed to cover more area, concentrated attacks punched through their formations. Days turned into weeks. The Devourers, for all their adaptability, had never encountered this kind of warfare. They were used to prey that eventually tired, that made mistakes from exhaustion, that gave up. But the human-led fleet rotated crews, maintained supply lines, and kept constant pressure. It was persistence hunting refined by technology and executed with the coordination of 300 species working as one. On the 17th day, something unprecedented happened. The Devourer Collective, the unstoppable force that had consumed countless civilizations, began to retreat. Not a tactical withdrawal or a feigned retreat, but a genuine flight response. Captain Rodriguez, now aboard the flagship, watched the tactical display with satisfaction. They're breaking. After 17 days of constant pressure, they're actually breaking. But Zhang saw something more. Not just breaking. They're evolving. Look at their pattern. The retreat wasn't chaos. It was organized, purposeful. The Devourers were learning not just to fight differently, but to think differently. They were developing survival instincts beyond pure aggression. Should we pursue? Asked the ethereal fleet coordinator. Zhang shook his head. No. We've achieved something more important than victory. We've taught them fear. Predators who know fear become careful. Careful predators can be negotiated with. The aftermath of Threshold reshaped the galaxy more profoundly than any military victory. The Devourers, faced with a united galaxy that could match their predatory nature, began to communicate. Simple at first, then with growing complexity. They weren't mindless consumers after all, but a species driven by instincts they couldn't control until they met something that could hunt them back. Within a year, the first Devourer ambassador arrived at assembly point. The creature was a nightmare of chitinous armor and weapon limbs, but it came in peace, seeking to understand the beings that had done the impossible. The integration wasn't easy. Centuries of fear and destruction couldn't be forgotten overnight. But under human guidance, the galaxy learned that even the most aggressive predator could become part of a larger pack, that hunting instincts could be channeled into protection and exploration. Admiral Zhang retired shortly after the Devourer Accords were signed. At his farewell ceremony, Velteri asked him what he considered humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy. "We didn't teach you to be predators," Zhang replied. "We taught you that being prey is a choice, not a destiny. Every species has the capacity for both. The wisdom is knowing when to use each." The galaxy that emerged from the Devourer crisis was fundamentally different from the one that had feared human nature at the revelation. Species that had once cowered now stood proud. Civilizations that had only built shields now crafted spears. But most importantly, they had learned the human truth, that survival sometimes required becoming the very thing you feared, and that there was no shame in having claws as well as wings. The Great Hunt Academy was established on a station equidistant from all major civilizations. There, humans taught the art of persistence hunting adapted for space. But they also taught something more important, that the greatest hunters were those who knew when not to hunt, who understood that today's prey might be tomorrow's ally, and that the universe was vast enough for all its predators. As the galaxy entered its new age, a modified version of an old Earth proverb became the unofficial motto of the Alliance. Speak softly and carry a big stick, but remember that sometimes the stick is just for walking, and the real power is in choosing your path. The evolution was complete. The galaxy of prey had become a galaxy of choice, where every species could be predator or prey as circumstances demanded. And at the heart of it all were the humans, the persistence hunters who had taught an entire galaxy that evolution never truly stops, and that sometimes the most profound changes come not from running away, but from turning around and facing what chases you. In the end, the greatest predators were those who chose when to hunt and when to extend a hand in friendship. And in that choice, both humanity and the galaxy found their true strength. Retriclaude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.